Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Good? Last day, right? Let's have some fun, okay? I'm Arun Samuga, Chief Innovation Officer at Elemica. Elemica is a 25-year-old company, coming on 25 years this August. We were built by the operators, for the operators. So we solve real hard supply chain problems. And what we mean by multi-enterprise is actually going to be important here. So when you think of your enterprise, it's not just your company, okay? So you coexist. Your coexistence is dependent on your trading partners, okay? So your trading partners could be your customers, your suppliers, logistics service providers, okay? So one of the issues that comes up all the time is when you think about chaos. So think about your four walls. Think about systems. Think about enterprise systems, right? So you have your planning software. You have your manufacturing software. You have procurement. So a lot of systems at play. You would think by optimizing those, you are on your path to success. That's not the reality. So what's exactly happening, right? The reality is much more complicated. So you have systems that are disconnected. They're not talking to each other properly. Workflow is not optimized. People having issues in terms of training. And you have decisions that are being taken that are not cohesive at times. Because when you think about each department, say the planning department, that does not necessarily talk to the transportation department. How are we going to tie those together? How are we going to bind that? So there is a fundamental issue in terms of disconnection. This creates a lot of different data silos as a result, which is normal, by the way. I mean, we don't need to excessively worry about data silos. What we need to worry about is how are you going to get value despite having those data silos, okay? So let's talk a little bit about what those data silos exactly entail. So we spoke about a few systems within your enterprise. Now, as we tried to allude to, the chaos is not necessarily within your enterprise alone. There is a lot of chaos that's outside your enterprise that's impacting the way you orchestrate your business processes outside your four walls with your trading partners, okay? So what are the different types of trading partners? So take a look at your internal systems. So from an inside-out approach perspective, you could say, I'm doing a fantastic job with my planning. My SNOE runs are giving me 80% yield and fantastic outputs. My procure-to-pay process is yielding supplier risk of close to 5%, which is acceptable. Supplier compliance of like 95%, which is great. Customer service excellence, I have like 99% retention. All those are great metrics when viewed in isolation or independently. But when you look at the entire enterprise holistically, you have a bigger problem. You end up fine-tuning one particular area because you go all in. Everybody has KPIs, right? Every department has KPIs for a good reason, because there's an overarching strategic objective that your company is trying to achieve. So what ultimately happens is you focus so much on optimizing one area of your enterprise, or maybe more than one, that chaos sets in slowly and steadily in other areas. Over a period of time, this becomes bigger and bigger. And it's extremely important to take a very holistic view, because that's where we feel we've been very successful in the past with some of the largest companies in the world that we work with. And we've been around for 25 years. We've been doing this. So the point being, you also have to look at it outside in, not necessarily inside out. And you've got to marry the two in a way where there is a significant amount of meaning that is being developed over a period of time through a layered approach. And what that means is your outside-in approach, which means your relationships, your collaboration mechanisms with your external trading partners, and the way your internal systems behave need to meld at a particular level, right? And for that, you need, obviously, data is the key. That's the language that all these systems talk. Of course, there are people who are kind of controlling it, who are managing the deviations, and you have a lot of processes in between that are supposed to help you in terms of being able to make things repetitive, in terms of making things predictable, deterministic, and add AI initiatives on top of that while your data is so disparate with extremely different data silos. So all to say, I think there are a lot of different challenges that you need to think through. And one of the main problems is, many people think that, okay, the planning engine is not talking to the transportation execution engine, which is not talking to my procurement engine, which is not talking to my sales order management engine. Is it an IT problem? Many people think it is. Unfortunately, fortunately, it's not an IT problem. It's actually a business growth problem. And let's talk about that a little more. What do we mean by business growth problem? So when we think about actors across the enterprise, managing different workflows, taking care of their own stuff on a day-to-day basis, trying to excel at what they do, there are going to be gaps in the way you take decisions. Communication is actually a much bigger problem than you think it is. Collaboration, of which communication is an important and integral part of, with internally across your systems, as well as with your external trading partners, results in a lot of inefficiencies. You are looking at about 50 to 60%, and this number could vary based on your company, your size, etc. So there's a lot of productivity loss as a result of these disconnected workflows, loss of data, and loss of packets of data across different systems. Now, say you're able to overcome that in some way, shape, or form through extremely good measures around systems and processes. There are going to be issues. At the end of the day, there are risks. Now, with disconnected systems, one of the biggest problems you notice is you're going to have a lot of things that fall through the cracks. You could have shipments that are delayed. You could have missed shipments. You could be paying detention and demurrage. You may need a last-minute, air freight that needs to come in from some other country just because of issues across your different systems. So there's a lot of monetary loss associated to the fact that you have disconnected data points, and your operations also might be completely disconnected. Now, even if we assume that you've gotten over some of these humps and that you have data flowing through systems in a way where it looks good to you, your company is in sync, everybody, all departments are working together hand in hand. Are you taking full advantage of all the data there is? Are you able to look into the data and take key decisions? Are you gaining those insights? Are you able to add learning on top of it? All to say, I think there is a lot of uncaptured value as a result of where you are and with the current status quo. And all these are components of chaos. So that's how it's tied to our overarching theme. Now, let's take a quick look at why do operational silos still exist, right? We'll touch on a couple of those. So I have not seen any one department or process or any one constituency within a company, be it taking care of your suppliers, your warehouses, your customers, carriers, etc., at 100% of anything. The 100% is a myth, okay? There are going to be automated processes. There are going to be manual processes. There are going to be semi-automated processes. Data can be structured. Data can be unstructured. Data can be semi-structured. All these create a lot of issues. Not all systems are shiny and firing at the same frequency at the same time. You have a lot of legacy systems at play that need to coexist and work with your modern systems. A lot of you are also on your journey towards, newer SAP versions or Oracle versions. So there's a lot of things that are happening within the enterprise. It's more like a dynamic system. And one of the biggest problems that we've noticed is there is a clear lack of data strategy. So in other words, people are trying to achieve operational excellence in each and every of their departments. But then is there anybody looking at this holistically and saying, here are my data pockets. This is where I can derive intelligence out of. This is where my gaps are, and this is how I can take it to the next level. So there is a lack of data strategy, and even if there is a data strategy, it's sometimes very limited to specific departments, or it's only with a subsegment of my suppliers or a subsegment of my logistics service providers, for example, or it's limited to, hey, we did a great job in Austria, but we're not able to scale it to Latin America. So you have like these issues which are actually real. So how do we overcome this? And that is where the multi-enterprise network comes into play. When you think of all of these different actors, not only within your enterprise, but also outside your enterprise, there needs to be a glue. There needs to be a data fabric that binds this, that digitizes and also contextualizes the data. So in other words, if there is an order going from a customer to a supplier, and the supplier sends back a response, a ship notice, an invoice, now the supplier turns around, they also have to deliver the goods. So they become a shipper in that relationship, start talking to their carriers, start getting the transportation set up, the transport order, transport response, bill of lading, shipment information, freight bill, etc. So we're closing multiple loops in terms of all of these information flows, which ultimately is orchestration. So all the way from when the customers place that order to the order being delivered, to the payment being made between the supplier and the customer, as well as the carrier and the shipper, this is orchestration, right? Now, take that and multiply that across different levels. What about the example we spoke about was like a tier 1 example, right? Customer, supplier, supplier, carrier. Suppliers, suppliers. That suppliers, suppliers. The customers, customers. Distribution centers, warehouses. How do we orchestrate all of this in a way where it's meaningful, consistent, and deterministic? That is the whole point of having a network approach. And that is the exact meaning of what multi-enterprise actually means. There is dependency between different actors, and then there is a glue or a fabric that binds it through a network concept. So that is the proposed solution. That is the proposed outlook that we strongly recommend that our clients undertake. And we've seen a lot of success with our clients who have been part of that journey with us. So that's a very high-level overview of chaos, disconnected systems, disjointed workflows, inside out and outside in approaches. By solving that, you ultimately achieved a foundational layer of maturity. There are still seismic changes that are happening, okay? I mean, don't get me wrong, digital transformation does not just stop because you've achieved a foundational layer of digitization or automation. You got to keep continuing. You got to go through that journey. Let's talk about a few real-world scenarios here. So the first one is, how many of you are on your journey? How many of you are on SAP and going from ECC to S/4HANA? Just a quick raise of hand. Holy cow. Okay, good. Did you ever realize that it's possible that in this room alone, there could be a few clients of ours, from my perspective, your clients, who are undergoing the journey from ECC to S4, and you could be a customer to somebody else in the same room who's going through the same journey. What does that mean from an external trading partner interaction perspective? We've multiplied the problem. You see what I'm saying? You're not solving the problem only for your internal enterprise. You are dependent on others, because ultimately the S4 migration in this example, it could also be Oracle, going from Oracle 12.1 or to the cloud ERP version. It's not about which ERP system it is. It's more about the fact that you are undergoing this enterprise change. And upgrades and migrations are again looked at as an IT problem. It's not. Especially with these migrations, they are your opportunity to re-engineer your business processes. It's extremely important that you treat it very strategically and not as a one-off IT topic. Because what's going to happen if you do that is IT is going to find its shortest path to victory. Victory in their sense and definition of victory. Does that work very well for the business? Probably not. If you're going to take whatever custom logic that exists in your older version and you're going to not dump it, but transfer it onto the newer version, all you've done is transferred chaos from one system to the shinier system. That is the word of caution that we want to work with our clients on, and we've been very successful there. There's a lot of different steps involved in terms of how the various challenges with these upgrades are handled really well with multi-enterprise digital networks. And these are some of the areas where we've seen a lot of success. So let's take an example where one of our clients is actually moving they were moving from ECC to S4, and they had about 4,500 connections, okay, in one particular area. While they're moving, it's like you're trying to tie your shoelace while you're running. It's one of those things, because you cannot disrupt your business operations while this is happening. How do you do that? How do you guarantee that? How do you certify that when you change something, it's going to have zero impact to your trading partners, which means your business? I mean, ultimately, you're getting raw materials from your suppliers, you're shipping goods to your customers, you are interacting with your logistics service providers. You cannot impact any of that. I mean, your business cannot just come to a stop because you're going from ECC to S4. Try explaining that to your customer when you missed a shipment and say, sorry, we're migrating to S4, we can't just ship the goods now. That's not going to work. So loss of revenue is a definite no-no. So ultimately, these things are time-bound. There are schedules. There's risk in terms of cutover. So a strong strategy where you're able to not only test, not only build out regression test suites, enable consistency checks in terms of transforming from one version to another, will truly help you with actually transforming your business and also re-engineering some of your business processes. And we did that with BASF, one of the largest chemical companies in the world, based out of Germany, and we orchestrate across multiple business units, systems, regions, etc. The chart looks a little complex, but if you do a bottom-up view, I mean, it's basically the different modules within SAP and how through Elemica there is connectivity with BASF's customers, BASF's carriers, warehouses, suppliers, etc. So as they migrated, what we did was we said, we will be the layer here of abstraction, and we're going to ensure that as you migrate from one version to another, you're going to have zero impact as it relates to your trading partners. So that's one of the success cases. I want to move on to the next one. Mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. Very, very common, especially in the process industry. Now, 70% of integrations during M&As fail, okay? And that's, again, because you need to decide whether the data stays, the connections stay, do we need to rebuild? If it's a divestiture especially, how do I carve out a piece of my entire IT landscape and business processes to this new organization and ensure that the users are trained enough to operate in this new environment where it's now a subset of what it was, or it could be just a carbon copy of that, but in a much smaller footprint of what it was earlier. So slightly different challenges when we think about mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. But I think the key point being, you, again, need a lot of flexibility in terms of splitting, in terms of merging, in terms of reconfiguring, and also about data, because now that data really does not belong to the original enterprise. It's moved on to your enterprise. So how do you manage all of that? Segmentation, as well as the transfer of connectivity, ownership, data, processes, etc. I think one good example here, we've been working with LANXESS since 2000, 2003, and not to go through each and every step here, but LANXESS went through a lot of transformation. I mean, they were Bayer chemicals to begin with, and they got split, they merged, there was divestiture, there was acquisitions. It's a very, very complex story. But the one thing that stood there, that stood the test of time, is all the integrations through Elemica kind of helped them port through, helped them transfer, helped them rebuild with just configuration changes. Because when you think of mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, there's a significant impact to enterprise master data. And the way Elemica's digital network, multi-enterprise network is modeled is based on network master data. So as long as you're able to configure routes, trading partners, and process types through the Elemica network, then flipping and switching becomes much easier. So we've achieved some of these huge transformation projects in as little as 3.5 months. And that's the success story that we try to reiterate. And these are like real problems. It's not just going in there and flashing a shiny toy and saying, hey, here you go, now we have agentic AI sitting on top of all of this. Great, but honestly, there are bigger problems that we're trying to solve. There is a huge glut of issues, especially when you think about not only your disconnected data silos that are creating the chaos, but these seismic changes. But amidst all of this, you cannot stop just because, again, you're migrating from ECC to S4, or you're merging, you're splitting, et cetera, et cetera. You cannot stop growing, You need to continue to grow. How are you going to respond to your board? And ultimately, if you don't have happy customers, remember this, I think one of the best products that you have towards your customers is the experience that the customer has about you. That is truly your product. Otherwise, you're competing, right? So the point being, you cannot create an impact, a negative impact to your existing customer base, and you cannot stop growing your customer base. You cannot stop diversifying your customer base, and you cannot stop competing. How do you achieve competitive advantage while continuing to grow? So what I want to do is maybe take a quick pause here, and I'm going to invite one of my close allies from Dow Chemicals, Head of Innovation from Dow Chemicals, Jeff Taylor. I hope you give him a round of applause. Yeah. Does the mic work?
Good morning, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for being here. Just a couple of questions. So, Elemica and Dow has been working together. Dow is one of the founders of Elemica, so we've been together for 25 years now. Jeff, maybe if you could highlight how Elemica helped Dow in their digital transformation journey as a starter, I think that'll be a great start point.
Yeah, I think, the underlying theme that you've been laying out is data as an asset, and I truly believe that, and where Elemica comes into this journey is how do we get efficient and effective access to that data across our trading partners, and being able to use that not just for a single use case. The one you're highlighting here certainly is one of those where we went 2 to 3 years ago from mid-teens on digital ordering up to over 55% today in a very accelerated manner. But where I get excited in the innovation space is how do we leverage and access all of this data, not just in silos, but for other modeling efforts to improve the order management process, not just order entry. So that's where we see a network approach really come into play.
Yeah, and honestly, this is global, right? When we say Dow, we're not talking about just Dow Midland, Michigan. We're talking about Dow Europe, Dow Asia, Dow Latin America. So I think that's one of the advantages of a multi-channel, flexible approach that multi-enterprise networks offer. I think maybe one other question, Jeff, is where do you see this going? So we've automated orders. The sales orders are coming into Dow systems pretty seamlessly in a rather reasonably touchless fashion with a lot of efficiencies built in. And we're trying to mature that process. Your customer service representatives have now reached a different level, not only in terms of digitization, but also customer satisfaction. And you put in necessary tools in place to engage with your customers based on how this network is feeding some of this data. But where do we go from here? We talk about orchestration. Is there anything else that we can think about in terms of how to extend this and make it more flexible?
Yeah, great question. I think areas that I'm excited about within our industry, distributed order management really hasn't taken hold yet, and the thought of going on to an e-commerce platform like Dow.com and being able to place an order and efficiently fulfill that from anywhere across our trading network, so within distribution or our warehouse network that are third party, ultimately reducing costs and increasing that customer experience and fulfilling it in a much more timely manner than from our own inventory. And another key benefit of that would be really the sustainability and carbon footprint. So if our distributor or our third-party warehouse is miles away from a customer versus our manufacturing plant, we can be much more efficient in delivering that. Another area that gets me excited is thinking about multi-echelon inventory optimization, and not just doing that across our organization within our four walls, but actually looking across the network and having visibility to that inventory and ensuring that we're optimizing across the value chain, which is really exciting when you start thinking about the times we live in with the disruptions, with the pressures on working capital. There's really a fairly big lever there that we can go after, which gets me excited about what comes next on this digital journey.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
So in a nutshell, tying it all back together, right? I mean, where we started was the definition of chaos, disconnected systems, disconnected data stores, and disjointed workflows within the enterprise, and then a lack of like a seamless fabric with your external trading partners as it relates to your customers, suppliers, logistics service providers. So there was a before and after kind of state that I wanted to quickly highlight here. So we started off here, and then we spoke about how multi-enterprise networks come in, contextualize, not only digitize data, but add meaning to it, like a purchase order. Honestly, is a purchase order regardless of whether it comes from customer 1 to supplier 10 or customer 15 to supplier 2, right? I mean, it has to kind of eventually look the same within. It has to have the same meaning ultimately. For that, creating a domain-driven architecture around the context itself becomes extremely important, and that's what we call a data fabric. So in this case, from Dow's perspective, if you go all the way out to their customers, that's the journey that Jeff just discussed and described. Now we want to take that, now we have that pipes built in, there's context that's built in. How do we take it to the next level in terms of making it more flexible? So these are layers that you could add on top of this pipe, and building out this fabric is extremely critical in ensuring that not only you have a strong foundational layer, but then you talk about AI, you talk about RPAs, you talk about any advanced digital transformation tool there is, adding it on top of it makes it extremely easy because now all your data is actually speaking the same language. So to wrap it up, I think, as Jeff alluded to, networks are one of the primary vehicles for you to ultimately solve the real supply chain problem. The real supply chain problem is the bullwhip effect. Now, that's going to be created either through risk, through disruptions, supply issues, just name it. Those are always going to be there. How are you going to manage that? Is it enough for you to just look at your tier 1 supply chain? This slide is actually interesting for me because when we think about value chains, the process industry, the chemical companies ultimately feed almost all verticals, and we are very lucky to be in that space because we are able to look at the automotive industry, we are able to look at the life sciences industry, we are able to treat the consumer packaged goods industry and the manufacturing industry in general, right? Because we have that lens that we can look through. And what we notice is all these interactions between these companies can be glued together very meaningfully. And it's not just about a customer to a supplier relationship. It could be customer 1 to supplier 1 to supplier 2 to supplier 3. And you could think of a multi-echelon structure right here. And we're not saying just go and model it across all your entire network, right? Pick 2 or 3 products where you can actually track it across multiple echelons within the supply chain. And trust me, you will be able to truly solve the bullwhip effect. And that's where we are headed. Jeff spoke about adding more flexibility into ordering mechanisms by taking some of the learnings from the CPG industry, especially around distributed order management, treating it within the chemical industry. Now that's a huge transfer of momentum as well as learning experience. And that improves collaboration, that improves your capability to compete. It improves your capability in terms of collaborating with other value chains. And that's how we see value. And from a network perspective, it's not just about exchange of data. It's about truly enabling collaboration and taking it to the next level. Thank you.